Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Alex Berry. I lead protocol partnerships at Mosari. And today we have about 30 minutes to talk about two key themes specific to DePIN. First is around migration, and second is around this concept of physical hardware versus purely digital. So with that, I'll quickly introduce our panelists, and we'll dive right in. So with us today, we have Jeff Outlaw, CXO of YAM, which is a DePIN delivering AAA quality gaming to any device with low latency and cost efficiency. They effectively are paying gaming rig owners for their unused cycles, creating a passive income stream. Next, we have Brent, who is the co-founder and CEO of Mapmetrics, which is a decentralized gamified navigation app rewarding users for contributing map data, focusing on privacy and transparency. And last but not least, we have Sim, co-founder, CTO of FarmScent, which is streamlining agricultural supply chains, connecting farmers and businesses directly. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you for having us. Thanks.
All right, so with the first point, major theme around migration. What were some of the key factors that led to your specific projects to migrate, right? This is a massive decision. Would love to understand what that light bulb moment was for each of you.
Yeah, I'll start, I guess. So for us, we wanted to, when we looked at what the DePIN industry really needs, we thought focus was a very important piece, right? There are so much technology that's being built, but having the partnerships with other DePIN projects, because ours won't stand alone. We'll be partnering with other DePIN projects, and having a single chain that takes the best of the technology and puts it into one place and doesn't fractionalize the focus was very important to us, and that's kind of what led us to make our change.
For us, tons of reasons, to be honest. I think the most thing, like the network effect, is I think a very big one. But what I like the most about peaq in general, like they're really, really DePIN focused. Like there are other chains out there that are focused on DePIN, but not as peaq does it. Like they really, they come with features that are really relevant for us. Like for example, the machine ID, which is massive because we really need to kind of where is the data coming from? So we really have to verify that it's coming from a machine. That's kind of core for DePIN and also for the future, very, very needed to kind of grow this space. And in general, what we were looking for was a chain that is cheap transactions, very fast transaction, and super reliable, with the main focus on DePIN. That's because what we're building is a navigation app where people can update all their metadata, and we need to reward them all the time. So if we don't have this as a kind of baseline, we cannot go ahead. And this is kind of the main core thing that peaq really, really stands for, which is awesome, and all the other stuff that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I'll take it from a different angle. I feel like we've seen this transition towards a zero marginal cost society in this internet age, right? Now with Web3, we're going to a negative marginal cost society where we pay the users and incentivize the users to actually participate, right? So let's imagine we have farmers as FarmScent. We have a bunch of revenue coming from the profits we make from commodities. We use that to buy a sensor and we give it to a farmer who can't afford it. He puts it into the ground that generates all this valuable environmental data. That data gets fed into Mapmetrics and then is useful to a bunch of stakeholders. That data then is fed into our supply chain. That supply chain data then ends up with the consumer who's willing to pay extra because they're getting all this extra value. Now that's a big value dynamo that all connects together. And something like peaq is so pivotal because it just makes it modular for us to click in all of these value models, right? So as new value models come along, we can increase the amount of value that we can add to each user. And what I really loved was the idea of sharing the abundance of the machine economy. Because the world is becoming more digitized and we're moving into this new economy, the machine economy, and we don't want to leave the humans behind. And for peaq, with peaq, that's just seamless.
Well said. One thing that I wanted to touch on was this concept of switching costs and opportunity cost, right? So typically whenever making a very meaningful decision, you don't have the full picture. You don't have all of the data. So very curious for each of you, what were some of the unknowns that you had to kind of think through with your teams, think through on behalf of your users when you were deciding to migrate, and how did you underwrite those unknowns?
Yeah, it's the same as I guess you do with any kind of due diligence, right? When you're moving into a space that you don't know, you want to try to find out as much about not just the technology, but the people behind it. So we had a lot of meetings with the guys from peaq to find out, what was their philosophy about having this focus only on DePIN, and why is that philosophy there? Talked about the idea that in our case, right, what we're doing is we're having people who have gaming rigs put their rigs on our network, and then we pay them passive income. So when we talked the very first time about the idea that we can decentralize revenue and put revenue into local economies in a much more efficient way than you would do with a central model, I spoke to, again, part of our ethos. Gaming is it's an exciting space to be in. I've been doing it for a long time, and it reaches a lot of people. It's expected to be a $400 billion industry, by 2030. So taking that revenue and putting that kind of revenue out into local economies was super important to us. When we talked to them about that idea, it was super helpful. And then again, the idea that we're partnered with with so many other projects. When we come up with a feature that we need, we feel like we can go to the other teams and say, do you guys feel like you need this feature as well? And then again, we can influence the building of the chain and the technology as a group effort because we all have the same focus of putting out a DePIN.
So the question was the migration cost, right? Like how much, like the struggle.
Yeah, so how you think through the switching costs, and then also if there were any particular unknowns that you kind of had to underwrite in a specific manner to then say, all right, this is the best direction forward for our project.
Got it. No, it's intense. It really is. So, don't underestimate it. Switching change, especially we are not coming from an EVM system, so that was maybe kind of like something that we should have think about before, but fair enough. So we're not coming from an EVM, so for us it was even more difficult. But the change is massive. It really is, because we're not talking about just swapping a chain one of the other, right? You integrate it in your software, you integrate it into your hardware, in your backend, in the chain itself. It's so complex. If you change it in one of those sectors, you have to change all of it. So for us, it was a huge undertaking. And also, if there are also any kind of starting projects out here, really kind of look into which chain you are using, which one is fitting your project best. Because as soon as you have to switch, it's a massive undertaking. And every blockchain has their own specialities. So for example, with peaq is perfect for DePIN. So if you're into DePIN, I would definitely consider looking into that, because it's not it's not a lot of fun to change from chain. Yeah.
For us, it was much easier. We started as a marketplace to connect farmers and the wholesalers. As soon as the DePIN idea came along, we realized, okay, we just make that shift. We spoke to our community. They've always stood behind us, and they're very flexible in their way of doing it. So we were early enough that we didn't have those issues. It was pretty seamless.
Makes sense. Pivoting slightly, let's talk about long-term incentive mechanisms. So one thing that we aim to do and solve for at Messari within our research is identifying signal in the market, and then also being able to delineate between what is something that will be likely short-lived versus what is something that truly has a flywheel effect that should gain momentum over the long term, and that's where the incentives truly matter. So with that context, looking ahead, what are some of the long-term strategic benefits that you all see that you will be able to unlock, one for your projects, two for your users, and really just long-term growth by migrating to peaq?
Yeah, sure. Well, what I think, besides that the blockchain of peaq is very solid, what I like is the projects that they attract. Kind of if you look at how to grow, let's not kind of joke around. We're facing Web 2. We're fighting Web 2. They're a beast. So if we're all kind of start as individual startups, it's going to be very tough to take on the big guys. But what I love with peaq is that they kind of collect all those separate DePIN projects, and collaboratively we can actually build something way bigger. So we can share data on the chain super quick, like frictionless, like you can kind of like, for example, we're building a navigation app. We have a weather station. We can put their data directly in our map. We are building now a map for farm stands. They need a location of their farms. They need a pin on the map. They need to geolocate like the area of the hectares of land of those farmers, and we can draw that on the map for them and visualize this for their users and for the world to see. So this is super cool because now they go on board on our grant program, and it's kind of like they don't have to go to the hostel to Web 2, and we getting data from them as well. Together we can increase the value of that data because data together is enriching, because it's not just one data point. If you want to have valuable data, you connect the dots. That's why Web 2 is just so super powerful. They're not collecting pieces of data and that's it. That's how they make one big pile of data, and that's how they use to project stuff, like how to predict stuff. I like the entire infrastructure of Web 2 is super powerful because I have our data. And if we can manage to do this all together with Web 3, there's a big chance that we can fight them.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the incentive mechanism for me personally is the impact that it creates in the real world, right? I think the idea of value in my mind and the way that we discuss it is how many lives can we improve and how much can we improve those lives, right? And the kind of long-term incentive is that if we can figure out a way to take this extremely digital value world that we're building, economy that we're building, and make it digestible and implementable for the average person, for a farmer in the middle of a field in Indonesia, then that farmer is able to feed their children better and provide them a brighter future, and those kids will then go build the bright future that we're all envisioning. I think that's the long form of this DePIN infrastructure, because we get lost in the weeds of that. We got data, we got info, we got sensors, we got all this stuff, and the average person's like, you're not speaking English.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I agree.
That's it.
And as much as I love the everything for the farming, because that's part of my background, again, coming from the gaming side where it's supposed to be just about fun, and the example that I use for the end user, my son wants a new monitor for his computer. I don't want to pay for a new monitor, but if he can earn a new monitor by having his rig at night when he's in bed or when he's at school, if he can have his rig earning him the money every month that he's able to pull up and then spend to buy his new monitor, I'm off the hook. And we have a great use case for why it's valuable to have the gaming rigs on the network.
It's a win-win. Love that. Let's now pivot to the second theme. Many of us have heard this concept that there's a spectrum where on one hand we have the P, right, the physical, the hardware infrastructure, and then on the other end of that spectrum we have purely digital. So curious, how do you all think about where a specific DePIN falls on that spectrum? What are the implications for that user experience? I know, Sim, you were just touching on that, but I would love to expand on that thought.
Yeah, I feel like we fall dead center on the physical to digital spectrum. On one side, we're bringing this complex digital world to the people in the physical who normally can't access it. On the other side, we're bringing the physical users to projects and the digital world that actually is in need of those people. But I really feel like, DePIN is bringing sexy back. Because it's been beautiful being in this world where we just click buttons with dogs with hats on them and make a bunch of money and get a bunch of users, but actually don't have very much impact in people's lives. Nobody's complaining about that. But now it's time to swing the pendulum towards the P, where we take all of these digital value mechanisms and powerful technologies and put them in the hands of the people that are literally growing our food, that actually feed our families, that sustain us. So we're dead center.
Yeah, I would say for us, again, the gaming space, you've got the physical devices and the Xbox, your PlayStations, your PCs, and you've got the service of providing a game to people. So I think that we see ourselves in the middle. We're a new delivery system. We use gaming rigs to replace the Xbox and the PlayStations, and again, they're all available to people. But we're also a service not just for the game player, because getting a game to go on a website, super helpful. You can have access to more games if you have a lower-end PC. but for the game developers themselves, right? The game developing industry is looking for ways to get their content out to more people at a cheaper way. So those gaming developers now have a new system, or will have a new system, to distribute distribute easier to more people. And again, this is something that the game industry is really looking for, and we hope to, what we do for them is expands their industry.
Cool. Yeah. I think it really depends on the project itself, obviously, but the main goal of the game of Web3 should be more to have an interface compatible with Web 2. Because I think if the bridge between Web 2 and Web 3 is too complicated, then people will not migrate. So we have seen like a lot that it's friction that actually stops people from coming over. Like things are too complicated. We now see, for example, wallets. You don't need your keys anymore. It's like you can just log in, like what peaq is now doing with Particle. Like you can just log in with your email, and then you have a wallet in the background, and then that's stuff that we need in Web3. So like the same goes with the hardware. If what we do, for example, right now, if we have the app, we fire up the hardware, and it's connected via Bluetooth. It's just the only thing what you need to do is turn on the hardware. At this point, it's the same as connecting your headphones. So then the friction is gone. But as soon you have to go to your router and you have to disconnect port number 0 or whatever, and then you have to go into the technical stuff, I believe that's where you lose your users. So to onboard as many and going for the mass adoption, I think that we should look into the interface and the usability of both the hardware and the software.
Makes sense. Let's double down on scaling with physical infrastructure for a moment. We had a talk earlier backstage. Would love for you to share a little bit to the audience about how you guys are actually building the hardware. As I understand it, your brother is the one that is building it. I met him the other night. Very interesting guy, very bright. Yeah. So maybe we'll start with you, Brent, around how the team thinks through scaling, especially when, as you mentioned, you're competing against Web 2, which they have all the infrastructure, they have the supply chain, right? They've been doing this for decades. Would love to unpack that.
Yeah, sure. So there's several components, right? So scaling as a project itself and scaling the hardware sales. So how are we going to scale as a project ourselves? We cannot just go in and just like, here's our hardware and just buy it and it's going to be awesome. So what we have done is we have two-tiered system. We have the first tier is that you have the app for free and you can earn for free. So everybody can just download it and can use it to the max, because we also don't want users will not be able to use the app, because that's not our goal. Our goal is not to get much money out of hardware sales or whatever, but what we want to do is getting as many users getting value back for their data. The reason why we have the hardware, and it's a very important one, is that what we see in the future, if something becomes valuable, people will find a way to take advantage of this. So, for example, if we just have the app, and we have talked about this before, if you look at Twitter or X, you see a lot of bots integrate, like they're attacking kind of like Twitter, and they just share messages or whatever. They all kind of like comes from phone farms, they have AI integrated, they behave like people, and they can just share data anonymously over the web. And what can happen if this kind of phone farms integrate or intervene with your project, and they massively install all your apps, they can just share you fake data and withdraw your liquidity pool. So you give money for fake data, and nobody wins here except for the mining farms. And that's where the hardware comes in, because it can protect your data. It's all encrypted in the hardware. So that's why for us as a project, hardware is very valuable. And like the manufacturing and the scaling, what we've done, we have designed and done everything in the Netherlands. We have a very clever guy, our CTO, and he has developed everything. The firmware, the hardware, he kind of like created the whole shebang, and then he just sent over the blueprints to the factory in China, and they kind of like mass produce it. But the benefit from this as well is that you can massively scale. So you can just go from 1 to 2 factories or 3 factories. So quite like that wise, like, I mean, then scaling is quite a little bit easier. Sorry.
I love that we're having this discussion, because I feel like we have a special privilege in this space. Because we are a marketplace connecting farmers with wholesalers, cutting out the middlemen, we have insane margins in between. So the model is built so that 10% of the value, the profits from each transaction would stay in the token, which gives us consistent liquidity coming from commodity trading, which as commodity prices go higher and higher becomes even more and more profitable. That funding is what will allow us to fund the actual infrastructure ahead of time. Because it's a known fact that as soon as you get into the physical infrastructure, somebody's got to pay for it. So we're happy to take that cost up front. At the same time, like for example, Indonesia, we found that trying to onboard users doesn't work. All you have to do is go to a village and show one person how to make money by putting this thing in the ground. And the virality of that, everybody in the village wants to do it, and then the next village and the next village. So onboarding the users happens through that. The funding of the infrastructure happens from a real world value model that's becoming more and more valuable. And then the complexity in between, we just get a bunch of bright minds in the room like us and we figure it all out. And we get all our brothers involved.
Exactly, yeah.
For us, the hardware side was to find a partner who was already in the space. Our node is essentially a hard drive. It's an external hard drive. So as we approached hard drive manufacturers and some of the biggest in the world, when we went through what we were building, they got very excited because they saw the opportunity to take that device and put it onto any site where you would go to order your computer, your home piece gaming computer. If you just add this into your package, then you can very easily calculate how quickly from your earnings you've paid off the computer that you just bought. Right? For them, it was very exciting. So they wanted to move into the space quickly. We've got plans to make sure that happens. So that's how we approach the hardware sector of it. And again, it's essential for our growth. We know that when we looked at the amount of gaming nodes that it would take to run, say, Call of Duty, which is a fairly popular game, our estimates were somewhere around the area of 200,000 nodes around the world to run that kind of game. So I mean, you couldn't put we wouldn't expect to have all the users of Call of Duty be on our network, but that gives you a sense of the scale that we have to grow out to. So scaling out, we know it's a challenge, but again, the gaming space is it's an immediate win. When you take those kinds of devices and some of the projects we're speaking to about going onto their network, branding the nodes for their gaming projects is just another way for them to get their brand out there. They want to take advantage of that, and that's something also we're looking at.
Super interesting. And to double click into this for a moment, how are you guys communicate? Because the amount of work that goes into this is very different than most other verticals within crypto. So I'd have to imagine that as you continue to scale, as you continue to ramp up, you're effectively building this moat on the physical side, whether you're doing it in-house or whether you're outsourcing to a third party that now you have a really good relationship with. How do you communicate all of that work to the general audience so that way they can understand, now kind of looking at this from like an investment lens, that this is a really interesting moat, that this new entrant, they're going to have a couple years to catch up to this project?
Yeah, I don't know that, in our case, I don't know that I would necessarily go out to try to scare people and say, we have to do all this stuff to make it happen. Because it really, to their end, we're about entertainment. We want them to kind of ease themselves in easily. And again, our network is not, the game player doesn't have to know anything about Web3. If the game is Web3 enabled, that's great, but it doesn't have to be. The only person really that's applied in the Web3 space for our network are the node operators. The game developers don't have to understand Web3 at all, too. That's important to us because not every gaming company wants to get into the Web3 space. So I would say that it's not even that hiding it necessarily. We just don't think we're going to add that stress to the conversation. It is really as simple as saying, what we do is we've created a network that's very similar to what you would find with YouTube, in that you just take your game stream, and put it on our network, and it reaches every website that you'd want to.
Cool. For us, it's focusing on the obvious what Web3 comes with. For example, privacy. If you think about navigation apps in general, they kind of they know exactly where you are, they have all your data, and they know who you are as a person. I think that's the most dangerous part of this whole kind of Web2 scenario. So we can just kind of tell our audience, we're not just building a navigation app, we're also looking at your privacy. Your online data should not be connected with your offline personality. So why do we need your credit card details? And why do we know who you exactly are as a person? Well, we're tracking data of you. That can be separate, that should be separate, because data is something on itself. Why do we need a name attached to it? You can still sell that. We still have all the other like metrics that we need to make it valuable. But like that thing that Web2 has created, like 20, 30 years ago, with attaching your personal life with the online world, that's something that we really, really, really have to kind of like get rid of. So that's a big selling point for us as well, I think.
I feel like the world is creating our moat for us, for FarmSense, because it's been so interesting having this conversation of food security with different stakeholders, right? We spoke to Indonesia, and the moment we started the conversation, the ministries instantly opened the doors and said, okay, if you can show us how to connect to these global liquidity pipelines that are apparently being built, we're happy to let you do whatever you like. We went to the Middle Eastern countries, which are facing massive food security issues. The moment we said we want to build pipelines to deliver the food and make it more seamless, they opened all the doors. We went to China, and within a week, they made us part of the Belt and Road Initiative. We speak to MasterCard, and they're like, the minimum we want you to deal with is 120 million because we see the value here, right? So as food security gets worse, as the volatility in the world gets crazier, as supply chains start to get more and more unstable, it's creating the demand and the need for what we're doing. But at the same time, we've had this discussion a lot of times where we've realized that we don't want to build a moat so competitors can't come along. We've left the world of competition and we've entered the world of collaboration. Billions of people need to be fed. We'd be happy to have other people use this exact infrastructure and come along. You're not going to take anything from us in the process. If anything, we get the karma of knowing that we've been able to just feed more people. And if you want to feed more people, let's go feed more people, right?
Love that. Yeah, it's not zero sum. I had two last questions. One, just taking a step back for a moment. We at Messari have been very interested in DePIN all the way from when we coined the term to now you look at today that there's a major L1 that's solely focused on DePIN. There's all of these really exciting projects building within this vertical. For me personally, one of the things that's most fascinating about it is it kind of removes a lot of, like, crypto is very esoteric, right? If you go to an event with non-crypto people and you talk to them about what you do, it's a very interesting conversation and it's very humbling in most times. So we've kind of touched on this, but would love to just be very clear on if you can share with your end users, your customers, how much does crypto actually come up in the conversation? How much do they care about it versus them actually just solving the problem that you've built a solution for?
Yeah, so for the game developers we speak to, there's nervousness because a lot of users have seen Web3 gaming not be what they wanted it to be or not be right. So again, we do take steps to say to them that it doesn't have to have any kind of Web3. You don't have to touch Web3 at all. Just have an Unreal project, put it on our network. So so again, we try to make sure that it's not a conversation that they need to get into. Now again, if they want to, we can show them who our partners are to put Web3 elements into their games, but it's not something that we push on them at all.
I think that like now we're dealing with like a lot of early adapters. So they're kind of like used already to the Web3 space. And if we talk about non-early adapters, I think we shouldn't only focus on crypto itself. It's more kind of like visualize the value of data. And you can do that in many other ways, but it needs to be on the blockchain to make sure everything is secure. So you could also give away discounts, or what we're doing, we're planting trees, for example, they can use the crypto to do that. So that's our goal, to kind of like get both worlds together.
We do not mention the words crypto or blockchain to anybody, except for this room, right? Because it's like trying to tell somebody to use the internet by saying, make sure you use the HTTPS protocol. They will instantly stop using it. Mm-hmm. It's also because the vast majority of the world is busy living their lives and technology confuses them. They just want to know, where do I click and how do I improve my life and my loved ones' life? Mm-hmm. How do I feed my family and how does it hit my wallet, if that? So we definitely don't use that, but we do use language like value. I think crypto is the biggest value generation mechanism that's going to happen over the next 100 years. And if we speak from it from a place of value, from improving lives, from feeding families, it'll be seamless in its adoption.
Mm-hmm. Love that. That is why DePIN is the frontier. We have about 30 seconds left. Let's end with this. rapid fire, what's something that's on the roadmap that you are most excited about that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'd say moving into the retail space with unknowns.
Listing.
I'm going to put the first sensor into my garden, and we're going to start generating the data, and actually we're going to take you along the journey of how it happens. So please join.
Amazing.
Awesome. Well, excited to follow along each of your teams and projects. Thanks so much for your time today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.